Hey guys, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of the Advisory Board franchise podcast, bringing expertise in the franchising community right to you. Today, I've got a special guest with me, Jonathan Fodera. He's the president of Integrated Business Financing. And let me tell you a little bit about him, why he's here, because we're going to talk about strategies today about why, like what can franchisors be doing right now that can help streamline the financing processes they're trying to grow through franchising the business. It's a big problem. It changes as the market gets a little tough. We're going into headwinds now. You might need to get a little more creative or have a better strategy so you can get more financing availability for people buying your brand. That's what we're going to focus on today. So let me tell you why you care about Jonathan and what he's got to say. He's a founder of Integrated Business Financing. He's been in the industry about 14 years. He's a real estate investor. He knows the space and what it takes to get money in a way that a lot of people don't, that I've worked with. And he's also on the other side of things. He's a father of two kids. He's been married. He's an avid boater. He's a crazy hockey player. He's still playing hockey. So something about my life, I attract hockey players to me. So, but we're excited to have him on. And Jonathan, before I botch it anymore, tell us more about yourself and about Integrated and some of the things that you guys are doing now. And then we'll jump right into the topic.
Hey, first, Dave, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here and provide value to your base. So I found, first off, played hockey all my life. I love it. My kids, my wife, everything revolves around them. I moved from New York to Tampa. Loving the transition, loving the move. It was about 18 months ago. And essentially, I got into lending by accident. I've been in the space 14 years. I ran direct sales for a lot of fintech companies. And I realized that something was missing, right? Every single person I consulted for basically did not look at the end user in mind. They had one or two programs and that was it. And business isn't built that way. Business is, you can't build a house with just a hammer. You can't build a business with an advance or a loan. So what I did was I built a lot of relationships over the past couple of years, and I bring specific solutions that are tailored to that client or that franchise. And we just try to help businesses grow, whether it's an SBA loan, a term loan, you name it, we work on it and make sure the clients, the end user, get into the best program possible. And so that's really what we focused on, and it's worked out really well for us. Right, most of I would say 90% of our business is referral based, and it's because of how we operate and what value we drive to our clients.
Nice. Glad to have you on, Jonathan. Really appreciate you making time. And today, I mean, really a couple of the things I want to ask you to kind of the start. What are some of the trends like funding, especially like right during COVID when the PPP stuff was going on and like SBA loans pretty much like shut down for like 6 to 9 months. Like no one was getting any money that way. It kind of, we were in panic mode trying to, and really genuinely trying to help businesses stay afloat with all the craziness going on. Tell us now, we're well past that phase. What are some of the headwinds and some of the challenges and the trends that you're seeing in the franchise financing world as smart, savvy entrepreneurs are trying to buy franchises? Tell us a little bit what you're seeing.
Absolutely. So I don't see, in terms of trends, the only trend that you can pick up is obviously SBA loans are prime plus, let's say 275, 375, depending on which bank. The biggest trend is the rates are going up, so people really aren't anticipating that. Now, if you zoom out, right, these rates are kind of in line with average. But because of the last 10 years, us having, super low rates, a lot of people are not used to the difference or the increase. And I'm hoping rates come back down here in the future. But even if they don't, you have to find a way to make it work. And the SBA loan is the gold standard, meaning 10 years. It's the cheapest type of financing or cheapest loan a business can get. And so one is the expectation versus reality. The EIDL during COVID was 30 years at 375. That's cheaper than mortgages. Yeah, you have to kind of plan for that. The other thing that I'm starting to see is we just came out of a period where we had massive supply chain issues. I don't think we're out of the woods with that yet. And small business has had to deal with a lot of different challenges over the past, call it 2 to 3 years. And sometimes that reflects in people's credit score, right? So I think, forgot who came out, but 37 or roughly around 40% of businesses had trouble paying rent the past year. So that's something that comes into play. However, the SBA loan, that's really what you want to focus on. If the franchise is going to cost, call it 250,000 or more, the best way to finance that, the best way to get that franchise up and off the ground is utilizing an SBA loan. And what I always prep people for is you're going to be putting 10% down, and you have to make sure that you have the necessary pledgeable assets or collateral to go through the process.
Nice. Let's dig a little deeper. You said something really interesting there, Jonathan, about the credit shift, right? Because business credit has shifted because during the pandemic, a lot of people weren't paying rent, and that was hitting their dinging their credit. So let's say I'm someone who's exited one business and I'm ready to buy another one. My credit is not looking amazing. Let's say it's okay, like a little below average or something of that nature. I mean, this is the cool part about what you do is you've got lots of different vehicles and channels and things. What kind of advice could you give to a franchisor that's trying to help a franchisee get financing, and you find out that there might be a little bit of a credit issue? What are some options or some creative solutions they could look at to help with that?
So the best way to address it would be have them work through credit repair. And the reason I'm saying that, I know that doesn't solve the initial challenge of, hey, I want to get this franchise up and off the ground. But I know that SBA loans right now, you need 700 credit. On the site, they'll list 680. They're not getting done at 680. You need 700 credit, and you need the pledgeable assets. So what are the real options? Real options are either he has to take in partners and being less than 20% owner, right? And he can still have control. It's written in the operating agreement. Or you fix the credit and then you go for an SBA loan, because the other options to get into a franchise are not going to be as attractive as an SBA loan.
Mm-hmm. Right. And just as a point of comparison, give us a couple of other thoughts or other options that people are looking at. I know this is not a loan, right? But like it sort of is quasi loan, like a 401k rollover, some of those interesting vehicles.
Yep.
People just lost their shirts in the marketplace the last month or two. So a lot of them are maybe thinking I should let that sit and grow back. But what are some of those other funding mechanisms you're seeing people use if SBA isn't an option because of credit score or something else?
Yep. That's a great point. So I wouldn't traditionally, could you use your 401 and roll that over and start a franchise? You could, but like you said, there's been heavy losses, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're gonna take a hit on it. The other options are, well, we have term loans, right? So a term loan goes off somebody's credit and provable income, meaning somebody has 660 credit or better, and they at least show they make $50,000 a year W-2.
Mm-hmm.
They can get some of the financing up front, right? And if they have, let's say, a consortium, meaning it's a partnership group, every single person in that group can go and apply for a term loan, and hopefully that gets to that number that they need to get into the franchise. The other thing is you could part some of these costs out. What I mean by that is, let's say you have 3 partners, and for whatever reason, one of them can't make it through the SBA application. So if each partner was able to qualify for, let's say, 100,000 on a term loan, now you have 300,000. Let's say the cost to operate or get into that franchise is 350 or 400, and a good chunk of that is equipment. Well, in our situation, what we would do is we would get them the term loan, and then we would work on getting them equipment finance, right? But the difference is the term loans, an SBA loan's going out 10 years, where equipment financing and the term loans will probably only go out anywhere between 3 and 6 years. And so what happens is, yes, you're into the franchise, but it's not optimal terms because those payments are going to be higher than if it was stretched out over 10 years. And the biggest thing to focus on when you're starting a business is always cash flow.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. But I see what you're saying. A lot of people look at it and say, oh, I need 350K to get rocking, including some working capital, runway ramp, marketing investments, etc. But if they're in an industry, let's say tree removal, and so you've got a massive amount of capital outlay, it's going to be more than 300K. You got to have a truck,
Yeah.
boom lift. You got to have the grind, the chip maker, like several other things, right, to have an effective business. Several ladders, lots of chainsaws, PPE, right? And
Yeah.
then a big insurance policy, right? So there's all that cash outlay, but if I'm hearing you right, as a good strategy to think through is what are the capital needs, and then try
Yeah.
to break those down into specific buckets, and then fund those. Like if I need to go get a boom truck, like the company that makes that has financing, right? And yeah.
Yeah, they do. I mean, so anytime you're applying for any type of financing, you want to know the breakdown, right? So I would say this, if even if somebody qualifies for an SBA, what is the breakdown of the funds? How much is being allocated for each? And what is the best program to secure that? A lot of times when you're starting, an SBA is going to be the best. However, you can part out some of that to purchase equipment. You can part out some of that in a term loan if you just want more cash in the bank. So there's creative ways to finance a business and a franchise as long as you know what the breakdown is, where you currently stand,
Mhm.
and what's going to be the best program to kind of check each box.
Yeah, I love it. One of the things that makes me think of is like the true cost of capital, right? Because there
Mhm.
are other vehicles, right? You can go to to Vinny around the corner and like get some sort of like a high risk loan, or there's friends and family, which is a little scary, like putting your relationships on the line. There's also I know a lot of folks also right now look at like home equity. Obviously, a little risky to put some of your personal assets on the line, but how have you seen that with pros and cons of things like mixing in some home equity with other things to create some more liquidity so you can run your business? What are some of your thoughts on that, Jonathan?
I've always tried to separate personal and business as much as humanly possible because you know what? At any given time, something can happen to the business, and you don't want your personal life to take any type of hit because of that. It might not even be your fault, right? Give you an example. I had a client that had a great business and he was in a strip mall and they didn't really announce it, but what they were doing a lot of road work right in front. And that drove people out of that strip mall. So that was nothing to do with that entrepreneur, that operator. However, his business was 60% down for 3 or 4 months, and it was completely out of his control. So in one situation, if he had used or tapped into a home equity line of credit and he had issues, that's really going to impact his personal life too. And a big thing is separating. A lot of people don't know this, but you have business credit and you have personal credit. They're
Mhm.
always going to SBA loan, equipment financing. They are always going to check your personal credit, but they're also going to check. They also look into business credit. And you want to be able to separate those two as much as humanly possible because let's say you do buy a franchise and you currently don't have a home and you want to go purchase a home. Well, if you've been operating that franchise on personal credit cards and a home equity line of credit, that's going to drive up your debt to income ratio, which is also going to lower your credit score. And then let's say you needed some type of business financing, that business financing is going to cost you more because you do have a lower score. So it's really about setting up your business or your franchise or your franchisee to have the most success possible with the least amount of risk and personal exposure.
That's super smart, man. I love the thing I love about this is kind of opening up the door to help people understand the difference between personal and business credit.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's talk about that for a second, because a lot of the guys that are getting into financing, and frankly, a lot of the guys that got into franchising, they were just like Steve or Frank that decided, hey, I want to start this restaurant, or hey, most like I want to start a home service business, I want to do a lawn care company, I want to start a painting business or roofing or whatever. I'm good at this, or my uncle taught me how I can start my own business, and then it grows, and they say I'm going to franchise. What some of them have never really learned is this lesson. So how do you, like, a lot of the guys getting into franchising are accountants that just exited a business, or they're entrepreneurs that sold a tech company. They don't know anything about business credit. How does a Joe Blow start developing business credit so that when the time comes to get an SBA loan, they look good on both the personal and the business side of that credit?
I love it. So this is a great question. I would say it's kind of like that old analogy. When's the best time to work on your business credit? Uh, you know, 5 years ago. And when's the next best time? Today, right? Like when's the best time to plant a tree? So what you really should focus on when you're trying to build your business credit is this. Once you have your tax ID number, okay,
Mhm.
you want to, I'm going to go over the 5 fundability factors. You want these before you start. Okay, you need a business email. Simple. Just go get a G Suite, have a business email. You want a business address. You need a business phone number, not a Google voice number or anything like that. It has to be registered to the business. You need a business bank account. I can't believe I'm saying that, but you would be shocked at how many times I see some crazy things. And then you need it all on a website, not the bank account, but the phone number, the email address, and the business address. It could be a one-page website, but you want all that information there. Those are the 5 fundability factors. Once those are checked off, you go to Dun& Bradstreet, you request your DUNS number. All right. And then that's the start of you building business credit. The challenge with business credit is 93% of companies do not report. The 7% that do happen to change from time to time. So you want to apply for business credit using your DUNS number or business tax ID. And basically it's going to places like Uline, Best Buy or Staples and opening a business account, making sure it reports to Dun & Bradstreet. And then you just use it like you normally use a credit card. And then over time, you're going to build those lines. And then you can actually have certain vendors report. And that will help you generate a good business score. Business credit operates from 0 to 100%. And the higher that score is, the better it's going to be when you need to apply for financing. So that is something that even if you're not a franchisor, even if you're just a business owner, you can go review the 5 fundability factors, check for free your Dun & Bradstreet and work on that today.
Let me review those with you. So I've got, obviously you need a business email, business phone. You need to have a business bank account, right? Those are 3 of the pillars, and you shake your head like, don't we all know this, right? But a lot of people don't know this.
Yeah.
And then a business website. And now, what was the 5th one? Like, what would I?
Business address.
Oh yeah, business address.
And hold on, let me tell you why though. And I see this on people applying for SBA loans with me now. You never, ever, ever want a PO box listed on any financing application. It flags and screams fraud, even if it isn't.
Okay, that's good to know. So it's better in that case to just use your home address as your business address, or what do you recommend?
What I would say is if you have a business address, a warehouse, an office, you utilize that address. However, if you are a home-based business, let's say you're a service-based business and you work out of your home, that's totally normal. Use the home address.
Yeah. Okay.
Not a PO box.
Gotcha. And tell me about this, because there's a rising trend for folks to use the Workshare spaces, and those have addresses, right? It's an office building. Is any risk in doing that if I go get a Workshare space and I've got a mailbox there?
If it's obvious, it could be, right? I would probably still use or utilize the home address.
Okay.
Because sometimes when there's that many people in one area, it gets crossed and confused. Because the main thing that's going to happen is they're going to scrape. Like anytime you apply for financing, all the interwebs are scraped, and they're looking and they want to make sure everything matches up perfectly. And if it doesn't, that's something that they'll ask about.
Yeah, that makes sense. Or let's say if some shady dude just got busted embezzling money and he happens to be using the same Workshare, I'm assuming that address would raise some flags for people.
Absolutely. Like if you just shared an office with FTX, that could be problematic.
Yeah, darn it, huh? I'm glad I wasn't in that exchange, but good heavens. Okay, that's great advice. So the 5 pillars of business credit development. Those of you who are thinking about getting into franchising, and frankly, a lot of franchise development professionals and consultants are listening to this as well. This is a great thing to do a little bit of micro training on. Maybe give them, help them learn how to develop business credit. Give them 60, 90 days, and then circle back. And then they actually be much more eligible, more prepared to get some business financing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Cool, man. So, okay, so let's talk a little bit more now. We've talked about a couple of mechanisms. So SBA, we hinted at the 401k rollover, trying to use like a home personal equity and credit. And then you also talked about term loans. Now, are there other creative mechanisms you've seen that people have used to fund franchises that really works?
I would say those are the main ones. The other one that I do is if there's an equipment aspect of it, you can go as long as you have 700 credit and home ownership and get equipment finance. Right? That's a program that we do a lot of, and it works. And what happens is when somebody finances equipment, they're starting to build comparable debt. What comparable debt is let's say it's an equipment intensive business, right? So like tree removal.
Mhm.
If you were to finance a $50,000 piece, I know skid steers, I've financed skid steers that are way more expensive than this, but let's say you have one that's 50,000. Well, once you make 12 payments on it, that counts towards comparable debt. So if you came back in a year or two and you wanted to buy, let's say, $200,000 worth of equipment, it shows that you at least can have serviced and you have built and serviced comparable debt in the past, and that will actually help you finance different pieces in the future.
That's great. So comparable debt just means something similar that you've financed in the past. You've got enough credit history paying on that
Exactly.
you can prove to the next guy who you might be asking for a loan from for more equipment that you're trustworthy. That's really what that means.
That's 100% what that means.
That's great. So that's smart because a lot of guys, they need to get a truck, right?
Yeah.
They need to get some sort of equipment to get started in a service industry or a van or something.
Mhm.
So getting equipment financing does open up that door a little sooner for comparable debt for the next piece. If you need, let's say now you're ready for your second van, you're a carpet cleaning company, now you're ready for your third.
Yeah.
That'd be a great mechanism to use to develop comparative debt.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I tell everybody never pay cash for equipment because you want to start that comparable debt cycle.
Hmm.
Even as long as it's over 10,000, you want to finance it because one, you can write off the interest. Okay. Or you do a lease with a dollar buyout at the end. I'm not an accountant. Speak to your accountant before you decide.
Yeah.
But that's a creative option to lower tax liabilities, at least for the first, 4 years of that. And you're building that comparable debt. And if you're equipment intensive, you want to set yourself up to be able to purchase more equipment at better rates in the future. And that's how you would do that.
Yeah. And let's not forget, if you're making capital investments, the depreciation value of that on your tax write-off is also big. Like if you're buying
Yeah.
300 grand in equipment, and again, I'm no accountant, right? But go talk to your accountant about this. But being able to write it off, whether it doesn't matter how you buy it, really, if you're financing or not. But if you're financing, you get the interest, and you also get the depreciation of the asset, which gives you kind of two ways to reduce your tax liability at the end of the year.
Exactly.
Yeah, love that. Hey,
Perfectly said.
yeah, you mentioned another good one, and I want to bring it up because I don't know a ton about this one, so I'm ignorant and learning. You mentioned a lease agreement with a cash buyout at the end. Why would somebody do that? I'm honestly not a big fan of leasing. I think it in the end it does the numbers don't compute very well. Like if I was going to go lease a car, but in the equipment world, there might be a really good reason to do it. What are some reasons why someone might evaluate that type of an option?
Well, we agree 100% on that. So I don't do true leases. But if you do a lease with a dollar buyout, all that means, believe it or not, if I took the lease with a dollar buyout option or straight finance, the payments will be the same. The mechanics are the same. The only thing different is how the agreement is worded. And again, I'm not an accountant, but if it's a lease, you can write off the entire payment versus if you're purchasing it, you can only write off that interest and then the depreciation.
Hmm.
So
Okay.
but it works the same. There's no difference. It's literally just an accounting, you know, addition or an accounting, move, whether it's a lease or a purchase. I don't do leases. I have personally found that most lease agreements, there's always a gotcha in there, and I don't ever put my clients in a situation where there's a gotcha.
Mhm.
I have seen it in the past where somebody has a lease and auto renews, and you're stuck with the same piece of equipment, and you're paying probably 20 to 30x what it would have cost you to pay cash.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially after a 5 year piece of equipment that has a 7 year shelf life and you auto
Yeah,
renew for 5 years, you're screwed, right? Now your maintenance costs go
absolutely.
through the roof. Yeah. I worked in the manufacturing sector just for a little while in the front office, but you know, maintenance on equipment, especially big pieces of equipment, is spendy, and so
Yeah,
it does behoove you. It's also why the electrical companies are always driving new trucks. They're never driving old trucks. Downtime of a piece of equipment that's critical to operations is a
yeah,
cash killer. So you're not making revenue and you're paying dollars out the back door, right?
exactly.
Yeah, cool, man. That's great advice. So I'm a young entrepreneur. I want to start a business. Key things. Let's maybe summarize some of the key points, and then I'd love to ask you for a couple of more pieces of advice for people who are already franchise owners, and then that are looking to maybe buy another unit, or leveraging now their current business operations as collateral or assets as they're going to get more funding. Before we go into that, though, any summary points for just someone who wants to understand mechanisms that are out there that they could use
Yeah,
to try to fund a business?
absolutely. So the two ways I recommend is always going to be an SBA loan or a term loan.
Mhm.
When you start a business, it's very important to start on stable footing. So that means you have a plan, you set up your entity, you work on the business credit. But most importantly, one, when you're starting a business, if you think you need 40,000, you probably need 80,000. So get enough.
Yeah.
Two, you can't start a business. One, you don't want to start undercapitalized, and two, you want to make sure your credit is as strong as humanly possible, your personal and your business, when you start. Because what's going to happen is the four factors that everyone looks at when they're evaluating an application is credit, and that's both business and personal. It's time and business, it's cash flow, and it's profitability. And when they're looking at that, you really can't control your time in business. Okay. But you can control your credit, and hopefully you have some inputs over your cash flow and your profitability.
Mhm.
And if you are starting a business from a position of weakness with your credit as opposed to a position of strength, you're setting yourself up for less financing options and higher price financing.
More
And
cost.
yeah, and that's always going to put you in a deficit. You do not want to do that. So my advice to anyone starting or that's early on in the process, that is super important to make sure that you are always monitoring those four things and really keeping a pulse on your credit. And the other thing is this, you want to plan out your capital expenditures. Okay, so what I mean by that is if you know you need a piece of equipment, in 3 months from now or 6 months from now, make sure you're working on all those things. The
Mhm.
best time to apply for a line of credit, by the way, every single business should have a line of credit. The
Yeah.
best time to apply for a line of credit is when you don't need it. Why? Because your credit's going to be high, your cash flow is going to be high. That's when you want to actually apply for it. And then you want to utilize it and build that relationship. You want to build that history. Super important, especially in these times. Every business needs a line of credit.
Yeah. I agree with that. I mean, because you never know. I mean, speaking from personal experience, where um, you know, there's a certain time of the month where you just collect more money. For whatever reason, it always seems like it's the end of the month, but the bills are due sometimes on the 15th, or payroll has to go out on the 20th. And so there's almost always, as you grow, and this is a crazy cycle of business growth, but a lot of people don't think about it. You invest to grow, and then sometimes the expenditures, there's like this funny graph you'll see a lot of, like, MBA guys talk about, but there's this graph where your capital expenses or your fixed expenses will grow, and so there's like a gap where my cash flow is going to be negative for weeks 2 through 3 of the month, and then it's positive again by the end of the month. And so
Yep.
if you don't have a line of credit, then what do you do? Do you go take some money out of your house to make payroll? I know guys who have done it many times because they didn't pay attention to that. They didn't have a line of credit established. So I want to reestablish, like, just hit this
It's
point.
huge.
Yeah, you got to have that flex. And the one thing we didn't talk about was credit cards. Because I know a lot of guys that they operate their businesses off of credit cards and end up racking up 100K on a credit card. We ought to, this is not a strategy that I would highly recommend. People can use it as kind of a flex, but you can't make a payroll payment using a credit card. So maybe Jonathan, give us a couple of gems of wisdom about, like, how would you advise people to use credit cards in running a business?
That's an awesome question. So a couple things here. One, don't put anything on a card that you can't pay off at the end of the month. Two, when you have credit cards, make sure they're business credit cards. You do not want that reporting to your personal credit, because that's going to impact your debt to income ratio. And then you go to buy a car or you try to purchase a house and you're like, well, why can't I do this? Well, it's because you thought you had a business card and you have a personal card, or that card is reporting to your person instead of the business. Make sure it's a business credit card. And listen, here's a little game that I do, and not even a game, it's just a strategy. It's smart.
Yeah.
If you put all your expenses on a credit card, you basically have a free 30 days of float. Okay. But you need to be able to pay it off. Pick things that you actually utilize. So I have 2 airlines I like to use. I have business credit cards from each, and I don't pay anything when I want to go book a flight. Same thing. When I want to take my family on vacation, I use the points. I just bought my son a dirt bike. My wife is not happy with me. I got it all off the points. Yeah, that was story for another day.
For another time. Just thinking that, yeah.
But long story short, credit cards are just another tool. Don't abuse them. Use them. Pay them off at the end of every month. Make sure you have a line of credit. Those are the best practices that I tell any of my clients.
Yeah, that's fantastic advice. Now, what about if we shift, maybe for the last couple of minutes, let's talk about, I'm an existing business owner. I already own one franchise location. I'm now in a different position as a business owner with some business ownership history and hopefully some positive cash flows and some profitability. And you know, like there's a different story when somebody's looking through the magnifying glass of my next application. What are some things as a business owner I need to be paying attention to so that I'm lining myself up for a good opportunity to maybe get more financing if I want to buy out a neighboring territory? I want to expand my business and buy 3 more. You know, I know a guy that was just restructuring all of his debt because he owns like 7 Denny's, and he was buying 4. He had an opportunity to buy 4 more Denny's. That's a big expenditure. So what do you do in that stage of business to make sure you're ready for the next financing opportunity?
That's a great question. So same thing. Make sure, one, I would personally use an SBA loan. Make sure you have the 10% down. The thing with the SBA, especially as an existing business owner, all business owners want to write down basically to zero to not have such a tax burden. Right. That's the truth, right? I'm not saying anything groundbreaking here. That's just the truth.
Yep.
However, here's a rule of thumb. For every $45,000 in profit that you claim that is on your return, you should be able to get $350,000 over 10 years from the SBA. All right. So if you know in 3 years you want to go and open, 2 more locations, my advice, figure out how much it is, and then you know what you need to have in terms of profit. Make sure your credit's as strong as possible. And also, a lot of people don't realize this. You can't even start the SBA process without an LOI, because they have to underwrite what your lease payment is. They have to know what the TI is. So there's a lot that goes into that. So make sure you're setting yourself up for success. Make sure you have the necessary profit margins. Make sure you have the necessary collateral. By the way, here's how they figure out how much collateral you have. Let's say you have $2 million in assets, right, against $1 million in liabilities. They take those assets and value them at 80%, so 1.6 million, and then they subtract the debts, which would be 600,000, right? So you take the 1.6 minus the million in liabilities, and now you're sitting at 600,000 in pledgeable assets. What that means, for the most part, is they're not going to go too far over that $600,000 number.
Yep.
And that's how they protect themselves.
Makes sense. And that makes sense too, because they're just trying to they're trying to measure in some depreciation into the current asset pool because the term of the loan extends beyond the immediate day, right? So
Absolutely.
makes total sense. But yeah, this is awesome. So any other Jonathan, I've sucked a lot of wisdom out of you for people today, but what any parting advice for folks that are struggling or looking for some solutions for financing a franchise?
Well, I mean, if anyone needs help, you can always reach out. But what I would say is, I think the best thing you could do for your franchisees is educate them on the process, educate them on, really what it takes, because the best franchises I've worked with, they're vetting the people that want to own and operate a store. All right. Some of the ones that I've worked with that weren't as well run, they just want to sell to anybody. And there's a big difference there. You want to work with franchises that are invested in your success, that support you with everything you need, and that educate you on some of these processes to put you in the best situation possible. All right. Because without that, you can get yourself into trouble. And there is a big difference between a well run franchise and one that isn't.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed. Well, units sold versus units open, man. That's like the ultimate ratio. Yeah, red flags to look for. But we'll do a podcast on that later with some other folks. Jonathan, this has been fantastic. I think everybody ought to listen to this. Franchise consultants, franchisors, and then anybody looking to buy a franchise. Boy, listen to this and learn a lot from the master over here. Thanks again for making time.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, my pleasure.